ॐ शुक्लांभरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करभावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। अगजानन पद्मार्कं गजाननमहर्निशम् अनेकदन्तं भक्तानाम् एकदन्तमुपास्महे। श्रीमहागणपतये नमः। गुरवे सर्वलोकानां विषजे भवरोगिणां निधये सर्वविद्यानां श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। अस्मद्गुरुचरणारविन्दाभ्यां नमः। वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसशानूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्। ज्ञानानन्दमयं देवं निर्मलस्फटिकाकृतिम् आधारं सर्वविद्यानां श्रीहयग्रीवमुपास्महे। श्रीहयग्रीवमूर्तये नमः। सरस्वति नमस्तुभ्यं वरदे कामरूपिणि विद्यारम्भं करिष्यामि सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा। श्रीमहासरस्वत्यै नमः। उमाकोमलहस्ताब्ज सम्भावितललाटकं हिरण्यकुण्डलं वन्दे कुमारं पुष्करस्रजम्। வெற்றிவேல் முருகனுக்கு ஹரஹரோஹரா. லோகவீரியம் மகாபூஜ்யம் சர்வரக்ஷாகரம் விபும் பார்வதி ஹிருதயானந்தம் சாஸ்தாரம் பிரணமாம்யகம். சுவாமியே சரணமையப்பா. வாகர்த்தாவிவ சம்பிருக்தௌ வாகர்த்த பிரதிபத்தயே ஜகதः பிதரௌ வந்தே பார்வதி பரமேஸ்வரௌ. ஸ்ரீ பார்வதி பரமேஸ்வராभ्यां நமः। कोमलं पूजयन् वेणुं श्यामलोऽयं कुमारकः वेदवेद्यं परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अस्मद्गुरुचरणारविन्दाभ्यां नमः। श्रीकृष्ण गोविन्द हरे मुरारे श्रीनाथ नारायण वासुदेव। श्रीकृष्ण गोविन्द हरे मुरारे श्रीनाथ नारायण वासुदेव। श्रीकृष्ण गोविन्द हरे मुरारे श्रीनाथ नारायण वासुदेव। पीताम्बरं करविराजितचक्रशङ्खकौमोदकी सरसिजं करुणासमुद्रं राधासहायम् अतिसुन्दरमन्दहासं वातालयेशम् अनिशं हृदि भावयामि। कृष्णो रक्षतु मां चराचरगुरुः कृष्णं नमस्ये सदा। कृष्णेनैव सुरक्षितोऽहमसकृत् कृष्णाय दत्तं मनः। कृष्णादेव समुद्भवो मम विभो कृष्णस्य दासोऽस्म्यहं। कृष्णे भक्तिरचञ्चलास्तु भगवन् हे कृष्ण तुभ्यं नमः। श्रीगुरुवायूरप्पा शरणं नम्राणां सन्निधत्ते सततमपि पुरस्तैरणभ्यर्थितानपि अर्थान् कामानजस्रं वितरति परमानन्दसान्द्रां गतिं च। इत्थं निःशेषलभ्यो निरवधिकफलः पारिजातो हरे त्वं क्षुद्रं तं शक्रवाटी ध्रुममभिलषति व्यर्थमर्त्यव्रजोऽयं। श्रीगुरुवायूरप्पा शरणं श्रीभट्टपादम् अनिशं हृदि भावयामि। वंशीविभूषितकरात् नवनीरदाभात् पीताम्बरात् अरुणबिम्बफलादरोष्टात् पूर्णेन्दुसुन्दरमुखात् अरविन्दनेत्रात् कृष्णात् परं किमपि तत्त्वमहं न जाने. കൈരണ്ടും കൂപ്പി ഞാൻ വീണ്ടുമീറക്കുന്നു നീരജലോചന നിന്നോടായി. ഏതീനു മഞ്ഞനെ കുമ്പിടേണ്ട തോറും രീതിയിൽ നീ എന്നെ പാലിക്കുന്നായി. കൃഷ്ണ ഹരേ ജയ കൃഷ്ണ ഹരേ ജയ കൃഷ്ണ ഹരേ ജയ കൃഷ്ണ ഹരേ. Good morning, everyone. I think we'll do a review of 94 today. Let me see who I had today. Lakshmi Agarwalji ji, are you on? We can do maybe one half, and then anybody else who wants to do the second half.
I can do.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Madhu.
Okay. Sri Krishnaya Parabrahmane Namaha.
शुद्धा निष्कामधर्मैः प्रवरगुरुगिरा तत्स्वरूपं परं ते शुद्धं देहेन्द्रिया दिव्य अपगतम् व्याप्तमावेदयन्ते नानात्वस्थौल्य कार्ष्यादितु गुणजवपुस्सङ्गतोऽध्यासितं ते वह्नेर्दारुप्रभेदेष्विव महदनुता दीप्तता शान्तदादी आचार्याख्याधर स्थारणि समनुमिलचिष्य वेदोद्भासितेन स्फुटतरपरिबोधाग्निना दाह्यमाने कर्मालीवासनात् कृततनुभुवनभ्रान्तिकान्तारपुरे दाह्या भावेन विद्या शिखिन च विरते त्वन्मयी खल्ववस्था.
Lakshmi, just few this third line, Vasana tat krita. I think I didn't hear the tat word there. Vasana tat krita tanu. Okay. And then the fourth line is Vidya Shikhini.
It's Vidya, right?
Yeah, Vidya Shikhini.
Shikhini, yeah. Okay. एवं त्वत्प्राप्तितोऽन्यो न हि खलु निखलक्लेशहानेरुपायो नैकान्तात्यन्तिकास्ते कृषिवदगद षड्गुण्यषट्कर्मयोगाः दुर्वैकल्यैरकल्या अपि निगमपथाः तत्फलान्यप्यवाप्ता मत्तास्त्वां विस्मरन्तः प्रसजति पतने यान्त्यनन्तान् विषादान्.
First line, Nikhila Klesha. I think the first line. Yeah.
त्वल्लोकाद् अन्यलोकः क्वनु भयरहितो यत्पदार्थद्वयान्ते त्वद्भीतः सत्यलोकेऽपि न सुखवसतिः पद्मभुः पद्मनाभ. एवं भावे त्वधर्मार्जित बहुतमसां का कथा नारकाणां तन्मे त्वं चिन्तिबन्धं वरद कृपणबन्धो कृपापूरसिन्धो.
First line, last word, Parardha Dvayante.
Okay. Parardha Dvayante. याथार्थ्या त्वन्मयस्यैव हि मम न विभो वस्तुतो बन्धमोक्षौ माया विद्यातनुभ्यां तव तु विरचितौ स्वप्रबोधोपमौ तौ. बद्धे जीवद्विमुक्तिं गतवती च भिता तावती तावदेको भुङ्क्ते देहद्रुमस्थो विषयफलरसान्नापरो निर्व्यथात्मा.
Yeah, stop there. Madhu, you're on mute.
Sorry. जीवन्मुक्तत्वमेवं जीवन्मुक्तत्वमेवं विधमिति वचसा किं फलं दूरदूरे तन्नामा शुद्धबुद्धेः न च लघुमनशोधनं भक्तितोऽन्यत् तन्मे विष्णु कृषिष्ठाः त्वयि कृतसकलप्रार्पणं भक्तिभारं येन स्यामंशु किञ्चित् गुरुवचनं मिलत्वत्प्रबोधस्त्वदात्मा शब्दब्रह्मण्यपीह प्रयतितमनसः त्वां न जानन्ति केचित् कष्टं वन्ध्यश्रमास्ते चिरतरमिह गां बिभ्रति निष्प्रसूतिं यस्यां विश्वाभिरामाः सकलमलहरा दिव्यलीलावताराः सच्चित्सान्द्रं च रूपं तव न निगदितं तां च वाचं तां न वाचं भ्रियासं यो यावान् यादृशो वा त्वमिति किमपि नैवावगच्छ किमिति नै sorry I'll do it one more time यो यावान् यादृशो वा त्वमिति किमपि नैवावगच्छामि गच्छामि किमपि नैवावगच्छामि भूमन् एवं चान् एवं sorry एवं चानन्यभावः त्वदनु त्वदनु भजनमेवाद्रिये चैद्यवैरिन् वल्लिङ्गानां त्वदङ्घ्रि प्रियजनसदसां दर्शनस्पर्शनादिः भूयान्मे त्वत्प्रपूजान्नतिनुति गुणकर्मानुकीर्त्यादरोऽपि यद् यद्यल्लभ्येत तत्तव समुपहृतं देवदासोऽस्मि देहं त्वद्गेहोन्मार्जनाद्यं भवतु मम मुहुः कर्म निर्मायमेव सूर्याग्निब्राह्मणात्मा द्विषु लसितचतुर्बाहुमाराधये त्वां त्वत्प्रेमार्द्रत्वरूपो मम सततमभिष्यन्दतां भक्तियोगः ऐक्यं ते दानहोमव्रतनियमतपः साङ्ख्ययोगैर्दुरापं त्वत्सङ्गेनैव गोप्यः किल सुकृतितमा प्रापुरानन्दसान्द्रं भक्तेष्वन्येषु भूयस्वपि बहुमनुषे भक्तिमेव त्वमासां तन्मे त्वद्भक्तिमेव दृढय हरगदान् कृष्णवातालयेश श्रीकृष्णाय परब्रह्मणे नमः.
This is the last line, Dradaya Haragadan.
Okay, sorry.
Then, I heard a dr sound, it's a dra.
Dradaya. I did do dra. Thank you.
Okay, all right. We'll continue with the start with Dasakam 95. Jyoti Dev, you can be a student, and Preeti, you can be a student. Okay, so this is kind of the last in the series of, I said there's Uddhava Gita, right, which is a conversation that is happening between Krishna and Uddhava. So, and this is the last one, which is like the previous one, we saw what is the means of enlightenment, which we said enlightenment is kind of realizing that I am not the body, right? And that is a kind of sense of realization, which ultimately leads to liberation, which is the final step. The liberation means you're not going to be born again. So even from the time you get enlightened, you still have lifespan left because you have existing karma that is there. So till that karma gets eradicated, you will still be there. But at least if you're enlightened, you know that what it is, and you just have to exhaust your remaining karma. Think of it that way. Liberation is, so finally all the karmas are exhausted. You also realized everything. So you'll finally get liberated. So you have no more karma. So you won't be born again. So that is the final state of liberation. So this is telling, how do I attain the final state of liberation? Through any means. Primarily focused on bhakti yoga only, but there's also going to be how to go through the what do you call Ashtanga yoga, which we saw in 4th Dashakam. Little bit of that is also going to come. So stanza 1. Adho hairanya garbhim tanum avikala jivatmikamatsitastvam jivatvam prapya maya gunaghana khachito vartase vishwayone tatrodvriddhena satvena tu gunayugalam Bhakti bhavam gathena chitva sattvam cha hitva punaranupahito vartita hetvam eva. So So there are, like different people like different approaches, right? Some are very philosophical, some are like, I don't want to get too much into the theory aspect of it, but it's everything mixed. So it goes back to how the first we saw in Dashakam 5 and everything of how this got created, which said that first there was this there's never nothing, right? There's always something. It is just what form it exists in. So it says first everything was in an unmanifested way, which means it was just pure energy, which had no shape, which had no form, which had nothing. It was just pure energy, and everything was in equilibrium. And then we saw how things start forming, and then it forms. Oh, sorry, my video froze. Why me? Give me 1 second. Okay. So, and then things started forming, and then we saw what is called as the Hiranya Garbha, which is the core golden egg, which was everything getting formed and then taking shape, just like how one. Sorry, guys, 1 second. So, and then it changed, then it forms the Hiranyagarbha, the golden egg, and then it says you then went in. I'm recalling 5 and 6 dashakams. So you then went in, you broke that into 14 worlds, which means things are beginning to manifest, right, into all of these different worlds, and that's how all of those things existed. So if you kind of think of that progression, it first started with something called as a Mahat, which was supreme consciousness. And then the individuality, the concept of the individuality came, which we kind of said is taking a drop of water from the ocean, and the ocean, the water bubble, the drop begins to feel like I'm unique. So it kind of went through that process, right? And then all the gunas started coming. So when you have to get liberated, you kind of have to go in the opposite direction, right? So it says we all have a combination of sattva guna, rajoguna, tamoguna. Rajas is just passion, desire. Tamas is just ignorance, anger, all of that. Sattvam is just pure clarity, right? And purity, which is there. So it says when for all of us, all of this thing exists. How do you reduce that rajoguna and tamoguna? That is very important. So he says you cannot just reduce it. The only way you can reduce it is by increasing the sattva guna. So by increasing the sattva guna, it says naturally the rajas and the tamoguna are going to come down, which means this increasing sattva guna is a combination of devotion, like the way what you listen to, what you eat, all of which we have seen, right? So the more you do that, the other things start coming down. But even then, it is not going to be complete. Finally, it has to be full sattva guna that comes through devotion. When you come to that realization, when it increases, that it becomes 100%, which you will never get to 100% until you are enlightened. But the more you increase that, the less other things comes down. Gradually you start going towards that point, because at the end of the day, when you are to get liberated, you cannot have any rajas, you cannot have any desire, you cannot have any passion, you cannot have any anger, you cannot have any of the ignorance. None of that can be there. It has to be pure sattva guna. So he says that is one way of thinking about it scientifically, is you have to now not have any of those other things. That is the best way to think. So with that, I'll finally come back and get liberated. आदौ हैरण्यगर्भीं तनुम्, I'm just breaking at the ma, tanum avikala जीवात्मी कामास्ति तस्त्वम. That cannot break that word. Jivatmi kamasti tastvam, comma. So that full line is continuous. Jivatvam prapya maya guna gana khachito vartase vishwayone. आधौ हैरण्यगर्भीं तनुम् अविकल जीवात्मिकामास्तितस्त्वं जीवत्वं प्राप्य माया गुणघन खचितो वर्तसे विश्वयोने.
आदौ हैरण्यगर्भीं तनुमविकल जीवात्मिकामास्तितस्त्वं जीवत्वं प्राप्य माया गुणगणखचितो वर्तसे विश्वयोने. आदौ हैरण्यगर्भीं तनुमविकल जीवात्मिकामास्तितस्त्वं जीवत्वं प्राप्य माया गुणगणखचितो वर्तसे विश्वयोने.
आदौ हैरण्यगर्भीं तनुमविकल जीवात्मिका मास्थितस्त्वं जीवत्वं प्राप्य माया गुणगणखचितो वर्तसे विश्वयोने आदौ हैरण्यगर्भीं तनुमविकलजीवात्मिकामास्थितस्त्वं जीवत्वं प्राप्य माया गुणगणखचितो वर्तसे विश्वयोने
तस्त्रोद्वृद्धेन सत्त्वेन तु गुणयुगलं भक्ति भावं गतेन छित्त्वा सत्त्वं च हित्वा पुनरनुपहितो वर्तिताहे त्वमेव तत्रोद्वृद्धेन सत्त्वेन तु गुणयुगलं भक्तिभावं गतेन छित्त्वा सत्त्वं च हित्वा पुनरनुपहितो वर्तिताहे त्वमेव
तत्रोद्वृत्तेन सत्त्वेन तु गुणयुगलं भक्तिभावं गतेन छित्त्वा सत्त्वं च हित्वा पुनरनुपहितो वर्तिता हे त्वमेव तत्रोद्वृत्तेन सत्त्वेन तु गुणयुगलं भक्तिभावं गतेन छित्त्वा सत्त्वं च हित्वा पुनरनुपहितो वर्तिता हे त्वमेव
तत्रोद्वृद्धेन सत्त्वेन तु गुणयुगलं भक्तिभावं गतेन छित्त्वा सत्त्वं च हित्वा पुनरनुपहितो वर्तिता हे त्वमेव तत्रोद्वृद्धेन सत्त्वेन तु गुणयुगलं भक्तिभावं गतेन चित्वा सत्वं च हित्वा पुनरनुपहितो वर्तिता हे त्वमेव.
In the fourth line, after hitwa, there is a pause. Okay, the fourth line. Okay, that's true. सत्त्वोन्मेषात् कदाचित् खलु विषयरसे दोषबोधेऽपि भूमन् भूयोऽप्येषु प्रवृत्तिः सतमसि रजसि प्रोद्धृते दुर्निवारा चित्तं तावद् गुणाश्च ग्रथितमिह मितः तानि सर्वाणि रोद्धुं तुर्ये त्वय्येक भक्तिः शरणमिति भवान् हंसरूपी न्यगादीत्. So in this, there are two stories here, sub stories here. So Uddhava is asking Krishna. I know that in one of the questions in the Uddhava Gita, he says that I heard that you actually talked about the science of the yoga of how to control all the senses, right? To Brahma in the form of a Hamsa, in the form of a swan. So what was that you actually thought? So then Krishna tells the sub story to say that the Sanaka rishis, the four rishis, they went and asked Brahma one time, is that, look, for all the beings, right, the problem is we all have attachments to different things. Now you have the five senses. Each of the senses gets attached to different types of things. When the senses gets attached to something, that object now becomes our desire. Let's say you have a taste bud problem, like you think like you want to eat something, some particular sweet. That sweet now enters into your mind. So your mind constantly keeps thinking of that sweet that you want to eat. So now you are seeking that. And now if you don't get it, you get upset about it, right? So it says, how do I control this thing? How do I control my mind, right? That's a question that the Sanaka rishis asked Brahma. So Brahma then contemplates, and then Bhagavan comes in the form of a Hamsa, in the form of a swan, and then tells that it is very difficult to control the mind. So he differentiates between mind and intellect. So the mind is something which is receiving all the inputs from all our senses, right? All various senses, and then it creates the thoughts, the feelings, the desires, everything. It keeps wondering, okay, should I do this? Should I not do that? It's controlling that. But he says at the end of it, you have the people, all of us have to realize that even above the mind, there is something called as a buddhi or the intellect, which should tell you that your mind is actually wavering. Bring your mind back to control. So you have to kind of separate. So we always say, oh, I always feel like doing it, right? That's your mind talking. But he says you have to realize that there's a higher level than the mind, which is the buddhi or the intellect. That buddhi has to step in, because he says it's impossible to control the mind. So there are only two ways. Either the buddhi has to come in and say, you should not do that, for whatever reason, or you fill the mind with other things so that your mind doesn't get distracted. Otherwise, it's impossible to control the mind. Right? That is what Krishna is also telling. He says the way to do that is you then fill your mind with bhakti. When the mind gets filled with bhakti, it will stop worrying about other things. So that is the only way to control, or your intellect has to step in, which is very hard because which your intellect has to step in and say this is not the right thing or this is the right thing. And he says bhakti meva, where is somewhere it says tvayeka turye tvayeka bhakti. He says devotion to you. That's one way which you can fill your mind so your mind doesn't get distracted. So this is a message you came in the form of a Hamsa to and gave it to Brahma. Satvon meshat kadachit khalu vishaya rase, comma, dosha bodhepi bhuman bhuyopishu pravrittis satamasi rajasi, comma, prodhate dhurnivara. सत्त्वोन्मेषात् कदाचित् खलु विषयरसे दोषबोधेऽपि भूमन् भूयोऽप्येषु प्रवृत्तिः सतमसि रजसि प्रोद्धते दुर्निवारा.
ஹூமன் கழிஞ்சு காமா உண்டு இல்லையா, பாஸ் உண்டாங்க.
End of the line comma இருக்கு. Yes.
सत्त्वोन्मेषात् कदाचित् खलु विषयरसे दोषबोधे विभूमन् भूयोऽप्येषु प्रवृत्तिः सतमसि रजसि प्रोद्धते दुर्निवारा. सत्त्वोन्मेषात् कदाचित् खलु विषयरसे दोषबोधे विभूमन् भूयोऽप्येषु प्रवृत्तिः सतमसि रजसि प्रोद्धते दुर्निवारा.
सत्त्वोन्मेषात् कदाचित् खलु विषयरसे दोषबोधेऽपि भूमन् भूयोऽप्येषु प्रवृत्तिः सतमसि रजसि प्रोद्धते दुर्निवारा. सत्त्वोन्मेषात् कदाचित् खलु विषयरसे दोषबोधेऽपि भूमन् भूयोऽप्येषु प्रवृत्तिः सतमसि रजसि प्रोद्धते दुर्निवारा.
Second line rajasi kapron there is a pause. Okay.
Rajasi.
Okay.
Rajasi.
Yeah.
The third line, bhuyo bheshu pravritti or pravarti?
Pravrittis.
Vritti.
Yeah. Double it okay. And the T there. Pravrittis satamasi. It's pravrittihi, but the is there. Yeah, pravrittis. Chittam tavat gunascha grati tamiha mitaha. That is goes away. Visarga comma mitaha. Tani sarvani rodhum comma turye tvayeka bhaktihi. That ish goes away. Visarga comma bhaktihi. Sharanamiti bhavan hamsa rupi nyagadit. Chittam tavad gunascha gratitamiha mitaha tani sarvani rodhum turye tvayeka bhaktihi sharanamiti bhavan hamsa rupi nyagadit.
चित्तं तावद्गुणाश्च ग्रथितमिह मितः तानि सर्वाणि रोधुं तुर्ये त्वय्येकभक्तिः शरणमिति भवान् हंसरूपी न्यगादीत्. चित्तं तावद्गुणाश्च ग्रथितमिह मितः तानि सर्वाणि रोधुं तुर्ये त्वय्येकभक्तिः शरणमिति भवान् हंसरूपी न्यगादीत्.
चित्तं तावत् गुणाश्च ग्रथितमिह मितः तानि सर्वाणि रोद्धुं दुर्ये त्वय्येकभक्तिः शरणमिति भवान् हंसरूपी न्यगादीत्.
The third line and the mitaha, after that the is not there, is goes away. Okay, so mitaha tani sarvani. The third line, I think I heard you say stani, there's no is there.
Okay, sure. Chittam tavat गुणाश्च ग्रथितमिह मितः तानि सर्वाणि रोद्धुं दुर्ये त्वय्येकभक्तिः शरणमिति भवान् हंसरूपी न्यगादीत्.
सन्ति श्रेयांसि भूयांस्यपि रुचिभिदया कर्मिणां निर्मितानि Kshudranandascha santa bahuvidaghatayah Krishna debhyo bhaveyuhu Tum chachakyata sakyena numahita tamam Shreyasam bhakti mekam Twadbhaktyananda tulyah Khalu vishaya jusham sammadah kena vasyat. So this one, so like we discussed some of this before, where we say that all the things that have been laid out when we say, oh, scriptures say this, Vedas say this one say this, right? When we say that, the problem with that is those have all been written not with an expectation that you will get attached to material things. But the way if you just literally interpret it, it will say that you do this, you get this benefits. You don't do something, you get some power. If you don't do it and you have that power, here is some pariharam to get over that, right? Which is laid out, which multiple times in all of these things, it is said that is not correct, right? And it's very hard for us to accept it because that's what we see everywhere, right? They say, oh, you have done something, you would say, you go, you do a thing that all your sins will get wiped away, or you want to do get some benefits, go do something, you'll get some benefits. It says it just doesn't work that way. Whatever karma you have to go through that karma. There is no way, unless Bhagavan decides that I want to make an exception for you and wipe away your karma, you are going to experience your karma. There's no doubt about it. That's why the greatest of the people, like Tyagaraja Swamigal, like Bhattatri, they all suffered, even though they were the greatest of devotees, because they had karma to extinguish, right? So he says that's not possible. So that's what here he says the scriptures, which is like what we discussed between the Narada Vyasa conversation, which I've said a couple of times. He said the way it's been interpreted, not the way it has been written, is it makes people believe that all of these things are there. So because of which, what happens is people only do things which they think is going to get a result. Yeah, I'm going to go to the temple because that's going to get me something. Now, you go to the temple and you don't get something. That means you now say, okay, going to that is bad. So you start associating doing religious things with some outcome. And he says the moment that actually happens, then your bhakti is breaking, which is what Krishna has beaten it to so many times in Bhagavad Gita, saying you got to do what you have to do. Do not worry about the outcome or the output, which is what it is saying, because you do not control that. Just because you go do some devotion or do something doesn't mean the result is going to be what you want. That is the underlying theme, right? So I think that's what he's saying here is the only way is just having bhakti with absolutely expecting nothing in return, right?
Here I want to tell for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
There is one of our family member is an astrologer. Now he is in 90s. So he verifies horoscopes for free. He does it as a passion or whatever it is. So once I went and asked, my Vyaram is debilitated. Can I put Pushyaragam? He say, will it benefit? Yeah, it will benefit. I asked how. Then he told, yeah, the jeweler will get benefited.
Yeah.
Then he told, whatever is there. Whatever is not there.
Yes.
So it is a reflection of your karma. So
yeah,
you have to go through that. And then I asked, what is the way out? Then he told, yeah, you can strengthen a bit only by
Yes.
good karmas. So help the needy, respect the elders. So that is the only way you can strengthen your horoscope. So
Yeah, and I think he's going to talk more about how to do that. But the other clarification here, which
that
you
is the
said,
science part of it. Even the
yes,
astrology says strengthening is only by karma, not by putting or doing puja or anything. Certain things needs puja. Only for that you need to do. So
correct. And I think the important thing there, right? There are two parts there, right? Not to get too into this topic, but a good karma is not going to erase your negative karma. That is what this is telling, right? Like you keep telling, I keep doing a lot of good things, which why does Krishna say 100 times, even in this further is, do not sacrifice the good karma to me also? Because you do good karma, you have to be born again to receive the benefits of, and I'm jumping a little bit to the forward one, I'll wait on that. So the point essentially being is that karma has to be neutralized. Right? That's the difference between that enlightenment and liberation. We said you might realize all this and get enlightened, but if you still have good karma, anyway. So, but it's a valid point, Jyoti. Right? And someday we'll talk about. I do when the like this this they say Sunny dosha. There's a Saturn transit that happened, right? Just not to distract too much. I'm. It's not to say that it won't have an impact, but you have to think of it as it's very scientific, right? All it says is you are coming down with so many good karmas and so many bad karmas, right? You have already inherited for this life. How does that get distributed is dependent on, because not you're not going to get all your good karmas in your first year and all your bad karmas for the rest 80 of your years, right? Or vice versa. It is going to get distributed in a particular pattern. The stars are telling you what you are going to get, but what you're going to get is fixed. Okay, the stars are not going to say, I'm going to give Jyoti extra good and Rajesh extra bad. That is fixed. It just decides when is Jyoti going to get good, when is Jyoti going to get her bad karma, when is she going to experience. That's what that is telling. So it's a good indicator for you to say, I know I have bad karma. Now my Saturn is in a bad position, which means I have to get ready. My bad karmas, I'm going to start experiencing it right now. Or good karmas, I'm going to start experiencing. That is how to interpret it, right? Anyway.
பட்
I don't know where
செல்லம் கிருஷ்ணார்பணம் விட்டு விடுறோம்ல ஜி, அதுக்கப்புறம் நம்மள ஒன்றும் பண்ணாது.
அதான் it's going to come, right? Yeah, agree. I don't know where I left.
We start with third one.
Third sloka ஆரம்பிச்சேன்.
Yeah. Sorry. It's okay. It's good conversation. Santi shreyamsi bhuyamsyapi, comma, ruchi bhidaya karminam nirmitani, comma, kshudraanandascha santa bahu vida gatayah, comma, krishna debyo bhaveyuhu. Sante shreyamsi bhuyamsyapi ruchibhidaya karminam nirmitani kshudraanandascha santa bahuvida gatayah krishna tebhyo bhaveyuhu.
Sandhi shreyamsi bhuyamsyapi ruchibhidaya karminam nirmitani kshudraanandascha santa bahuvida gatayah krishna tebhyo bhaveyuhu. Sandhi shreyamsi bhuyamsyapi ruchibhidaya karminam nirmitani kshudraanandascha santa bahuvida gatayah krishna tebhyo bhaveyuhu.
So the first line la bhuyamsyapi kapram comma. Okay, first line.
Rajesh ji, I have it kshudraanandascha santaha. I have santaha.
No, you can remove it because ba is coming later. Gently, the visarga they don't say that. Yeah.
Santi shreyamsi bhuyamsyapi ruchibhitaya karminam nirmitani shudrantascha santa bahuvidha katayah krishna tebhyo bhaveyuhu. Santi shreyamsi bhuyamsyapi ruchibhitaya karminam nirmitani shudrantascha santa bahuvitha katayah krishna tebhyo bhaveyuhu.
Svam chachakhyata sakhye nanu mahita tamam, comma, shreyasam bhakti mekam, comma, tvat bhaktyananda tulyah, comma, khalu vishaya jusham sammadah, putta sammadah kena vasyat. Tvam chachakyata sakhye nanu mahita tamam shreyasam bhakti mekam tvad bhaktyananda tulyah khalu vishaya jusham sammadah kena vasyat.
Tvam chajakyatha sakhye nanu mahita tamam shreyasam bhakti mekam tvad bhaktyananda tulyah khalu vishaya jusham sammadah kena vasyad. Tvam chajakyatha sakhye nanu mahita tamam shreyasam bhakti mekam tvad bhaktyananda tulyah khalu vishaya jusham sammadah kena vasyad.
Vanchachakyatha sakhye nanu mahita tamam shreyasam bhakti mekam tvat bhaktyananda tulyah khalu vijaya jusham sammadhakkena vasyat. Vanchachakyatha सख्ये ननु महिततमां श्रेयसां भक्तिमेकां त्वद्भक्त्यानन्दतुल्यः खलु विजयजुषां सम्मतः केन वा स्यात्.
Preeti, and the last line, Khalu Bishaya Jusham.
Okay, खलु विजयजुषां.
I'm hearing Bijaya and Kekradana. Bishaya.
Oh, sorry. खलु विषयजुषां.
Yeah, exactly. And so forth. त्वद्भक्त्या तुष्टबुद्धेः सुखमिह चरतो विच्युताशस्य चाशाः सर्वासु सौख्यमय्यः सलिलकुहरगस्येव तोयैकमय्यः सोऽयं कल्विन्द्रलोकं कमलजभवनं योगसिद्धिश्च हृद्याः नाकाङ्क्षत्येतधास्तां स्वयमनुपतिते मोक्षसौख्येऽप्यनीहः. A little bit continuation of the previous one, right? So good karmas, bad karmas, you've done something bad in any of your hundreds of births, right? Something, you're going through the suffering of that. Now, that means, does it mean you have to be unhappy? It says you don't have to be unhappy, right? He says, when there's a fish which is there, an aquatic creature, when it is in waters, wherever it goes, it finds water, because it always lives in water all the time. So wherever it goes, it finds water. He says similarly, a rich person is traveling, or a rich person is going somewhere or staying in his or her house, he always finds luxury everywhere because he goes looking after it. He's specific about it. He says similarly, but none of that gives happiness, right? But he says to get happiness, there's a specific set of 4 or 5 things. He says if you do that, you will always get happiness no matter what the environment is. One is, it says you should not desire anything. That is step number 1. You should not want anything, which is the first step, which is very hard. So that is number 1. 2, you should be able to control your senses. So whether you should you get something you like, you get something you don't like and eat, or you smell something good, you don't smell something good, let it be. It is bad, but doesn't mean I hate it. You can always say, I don't like this smell. That's okay. You may decide that I do not like this smell, but that doesn't mean I hate it and I'm going to run away from it, right? You just let it go, right? That's to be able to control the senses. And then your mind is like equal in all scenarios, whether something good is happening, something bad is happening, whatever is happening, your mind is equal. You can want India to win, but you cannot get disappointed if India didn't win today. So that is a difference, subtle difference, right? And then mind is always observed, completely focused on Bhagavan. He says, if you do these 4 things, which is nothing different from what Krishna said in Gita, right? If you do these 4 things, he says, no matter what the condition is, you will always be happy. If you do not do these things, any scenario happens, you will always find unhappiness in something or the other. You'll always whine and complain about something all the time. He says the only way to remain happy all the time is to control these 4 things, right? And so a person who becomes like that is not even going to need, he says, that's why he says, will not even need Kalv Indra Lokam, will not even want to say, after death, I want to get promoted, I want heaven, or I wanted to go to Brahma Loka, or I need a big empire on earth. They will not want any of those things, right? They just don't care about any of those things. He says, whatever it is, so be it, right? And that person will only want one thing, which is just wanting Bhagavan, just wanting the devotion. That is the greatest of devotee. So it says, this long, big description of what a great devotee. A great devotee is not just who's always thinking about Bhagavan or doing all the good things. The greatest of devotees is someone who doesn't want anything in return, and is just doing devotion because they just like to do devotion, or devotion or bhakti, whatever you want to call it, love, just because they like to do that, and they think it's a duty with absolutely nothing in return. He says, that is the only way you will not get into this, stuck into this thing, and you'll always remain happy. Tvad bhaktya tushta buddhehe, sukhamiha charato vichyutashasya chashaha, sarvaha, put is to join, syuhu, put is to join, sarvasyus saukyamayyah, salila kuharagasyeva toyaikamayyah. Twadbhaktya tushta buddhehe sukhamiha charato vichyutashasya chashaha sarvasyus saukyamayyah सलिलकुहरगस्येव तोयैकमय्यः
त्वद्भक्त्या तुष्टबुद्धेः सुखमिह चरदो विच्युदाशस्य चाशाः सर्वास्युः सौख्यमय्यः कुहरगस् என் எப்பவுமே கதா வரும் सलिलकुहरगस्येव तोयैकमय्यः त्वद्भक्त्या तुष्टबुद्धेः सुखमिह चरतो विच्युदाशस्य चाशाः सर्वास्युः सौख्यमय्यः सलिलकुहरगदस्येव तोयैकमय्यः.
Again, you said the da there. Salilakuharagasyev.
Other guess I will.
Yeah.
त्वद्भक्त्या तुष्टबुद्धेः सुखमिह चरतो विच्युताशस्य चाशाः सर्वास्युः सौख्यमय्यः सलिलकुहरकस्येव तोयैकमय्यः त्वद्भक्त्या तुष्टबुद्धेः सुखमिह चरतो विच्युताशस्य चाशाः सर्वास्युः सौख्यमय्यः सलिलकुहरकस्येव तोयैकमय्यः
सोऽयं खल्विन्द्रलोकं कमलज भवनं योगसिद्धिश्च हृद्याः नाकाङ्क्षत्येतदास्तां. So ing sound. नाकाङ्क्षत्येतदास्तां स्वयं अनुपतिते मोक्ष सौख्येप्यनीहः. That's the last word is together. सौख्येप्यनीहः. सोऽयं खल्विन्द्रलोकं कमलज भवनं योगसिद्धिश्च हृद्याः नाकाङ्क्षत्येतदास्तां स्वयमनुपतिते मोक्षसौख्येप्यनीहः.
सोऽयं खल्विन्द्रलोकं कमलजभवनं योगसिद्धिश्च हृद्याः नाकाङ्क्षत्येतदास्तां स्वयमनुपतिते मोक्षसौख्येप्यनीहः. सोऽयं खल्विन्द्रलोकं कमलजभवनं योगसिद्धिश्च हृद्याः नाकाङ्क्षत्येतदास्तां स्वयमनुपतिते मोक्षसौख्येप्यनीहः.
सोऽयं कल्विन्द्रलोकं कमलजभवनं योगसिद्धिश्च हृद्याः नाकाङ्क्षत्येतदास्तां स्वयमनुपतिते मोक्षसौख्येप्यनीयः. सोऽयं कल्विन्द्रलोकं कमलजभवनं योगसिद्धिश्च हृद्याः नाकाङ्क्षत्येतदास्तां स्वयमनुपतिते मोक्षसौख्येप्यनीहः.
त्वद्भक्तो बाध्यमानोऽपि च विषयरसैरिन्द्रियाशान्तिहेतोः भक्त्यैवाक्रम्यमाणैः पुनरपि खलु तैर्दुर्बलैर्नाभिजय्यः सप्तार्चिद्दीपितार्चिद्दहति किल यथा भूरिदारुप्रपञ्चं त्वद्भक्त्योगे तथैव प्रदहति दुरितं दुर्मदः क्वेन्द्रियाणाम्. So he says that way, the person who doesn't do anything because they want something in return, whose mind is always devoted, always attached to Bhagavan, who doesn't have that ego, like the same thing of the first two steps of the Ashtanga Yoga, Yama, Niyama, which is not wanting anything bad to somebody, keeping your things under control, right? Being kind to everybody else, and you're controlling what we discussed earlier. When somebody is like that, we said they're always happy everywhere, right? And that is because it says they are in a state where they are not getting influenced. Now, because of everything, or because of past vasanas, their senses are still going to get distracted. It may still be harassed by all the other material distractions which are actually there. But the distraction will be there, but the senses will not be conquered. So that is a subtle difference. You will still have distractions, right? You are in this world, you're always going to get distracted, but you will be able to overcome them. That will not overpower you, right? With all of these things, if you follow these certain things, and even if you fall off the path, right? We always tell, right? Somebody, like, oh, they were very devoted, but teenage age comes or the youth comes, they get distracted, but then they come back, right? That's because when they start off, when it realizes has a true vasana of bhakti, even if you fall off the path of bhakti along some way, that will bring you back into that path, because that will never get lost, right? That vasana will always be there. So it says, essentially what it says is, even if these things come and distract you, the devotion will come and burn all of those things up and bring you back onto the right path. You will never get lost. And like we discussed several examples, we saw Gajendra Moksham, right, where the Indradyumna was born as an elephant. That was one. Then the second one, I don't know how much I spoke about it, is Jada Bharata. It is not there too much in Narayaneeyam, but it is there, Jada Bharata Charitram in Bhagavatam, where he's born 3 times. And every single time he ends up making a mistake, because of which he doesn't get liberated. But the devotion and the knowledge he had always continues, except same thing is applicable to us. We just don't remember that, right? But in certain these great people like Jada Bharata, they remember the past life and the past vasanas they had, because of which they say, next time I'm not going to make a mistake. Now, we don't remember that, but it is all there. We are not here because suddenly something new happened and we decided to get devotional, right? That's there from several births, which is continuing. So Tvad Bhakto Badhyamano Picha, comma, Vishaya Rasair, breaking at that ir, Vishaya Rasair, Indriya Shanti Hetoho. So add a visarga, comma. Next line, ir goes away. Bhaktiyaiva kramyamanaihi. That's one word. Bhaktiyaiva kramyamanaihi, comma. Punarapi khalu tair durbalair nabhijayah. Twadbhakto badhyamanopi cha Vishaya Rasair Indriya Shanti Hetoho Bhaktiyaiva Kramyamanaihi Punarapi Khalutair Durbalair Nabhijayah. Just one time.
त्वद्भक्तो बाध्यमानोऽपि च विषयरसैरिन्द्रियाशान्तिहेतोः भक्त्यैवाक्रम्यमाणैः पुनरपि खलु तैर्दुर्बलैर्नाभिजयः.
त्वद्भक्तो भात्यमानोऽपि च विषयरसैरिन्द्रियाशान्तिहेतोः भक्त्यैवाक्रम्यमाणैः पुनरपि खलु तैर्दुर्बलैर्नाभिजयः.
Saptarchi Deepitarchi Dahati Kila Yatha. Some books may have Tatha. Just change the Tha to Ya there. Yatha, comma. Bhuri Daru Prapancham, comma. Tvat Bhaktyoge Tataiva Pradahati Duritam, comma. Durmadaha, put a Durmadah Quendriyanam. Saptarchir Deepitarchir Dahati Kila Yatha Bhuri Daru Prapancham Twadbhaktyoge Tataiva Pradahati Duritam Durmadah Quendriyanam.
सप्तार्चैर्दीपिताचैर्दहति किल यथा भूरिदारुप्रपञ्चं त्वद्भक्त्योगे तथैव प्रदहति दुरितं दुर्मदः क्वेन्द्रियाणाम्.
सप्तार्चिर्दीपिताचिर्दहति किल यथा भूरितारुप्रपञ्चं त्वद्भक्त्योगे तथैव प्रदहति दुरितं दुर्मतः क्वेन्द्रियाणाम्.
We'll switch second half. Let me see who I had. Jyoti Chandran, you can be student, and Harini. Chittardhi bhavamuchairvapushi cha pulakam harsha bhashpam cha hitva chittam shuddhet katam va kimu bahutapasa vidyaya vita bhakte Twadgata swada siddhanjana satatamari mrijyamano yamatma chakshurvat tattva sukshmam bhajati natu tatabhyastaya tarka kotya. So here a little bit, like we've seen some of this before about, it says that you can follow any path you want, right? You can follow Sankhya, like what Kapila has said, which is just philosophical knowledge. You can do the Vedas, you can do the Homam, you can do tapas, you can do all of those things, right? Nothing says nothing is bad. But what Krishna is saying is, if it doesn't have devotion attached to it, you cannot bind me. You cannot bring me under. You cannot get Bhagavan, closed enough or control. And by control doesn't mean you can control what Bhagavan does. It just means that he's accepting of you, right? He is accepting of you completely. He says to be able to bind Bhagavan, he says you got to have that devotion. So that is the primary one. Without that, it is very, very hard with any of these things by doing it alone, right? And he says, and even any of the other things that we do, it says it doesn't completely purify. It is like, I gave the example, like in Ajamino Pakyan, when we did 22, it's like the elephant which takes a shower and water and then goes and puts mud on top. So he says we'll do all this, and then we go commit the same mistakes again and again. Right? So we'll never completely out of it. So it says pure devotion is the only way where you'll prevent it from happening. You'll prevent mistakes from happening again. Now, how should that pure devotion be? He says a pure devotion piece should be such that you have horripilation all over your body. We says like, you feel the hair standing on your body. Your heart has to melt, right? When you're thinking about Bhagavan, or you're seeing, or you're saying, or you're singing, or whatever, your heart has to melt. And from that, tears have to roll from your eyes. So he says you have to cry in spiritual happiness, right? If you reach that state consistently, right? Then it says you are in the true bhakti. He says once you reach that state of consistently being able to do that, then he says nothing else matters, because that is the high. That doesn't mean like one time or two times. It's like consistently. Every time you're talking about Bhagavan, or you're singing, or you're praying, or you're seeing, right? Then all of this is happening to you. Then he says, then you don't have to worry about doing all the other tapas, or any other yajnam, and all of that doesn't matter, because that is the high state of bhakti, and you have to just retain yourself in that, right? He says that is the way. So that is what Krishna, I said, even Bhagavad Gita, even Bhagavatam, even here, he says any other tarka kotya, any other study of all of those things will not get you that experience which the true bhakti is going to give. Chittardri bhavam uchchair vapushi cha pulakam, harsha bhashpam cha hitva, chittam shuddhyet katam va, किमु बहु तपसा विद्यया वीत भक्तेः चित्तार्ध्नि भावमुच्चैर्वपुषि च पुलकं हर्ष भाष्पं च हित्वा चित्तं शुद्धयेत् कथं वा किमु बहु तपसा विद्यया वीत भक्तेः. Can do two times.
Okay. चित्तार्द्री भावमुच्चैर्वपुषि च पुलकं हर्षबाष्पं च हित्वा चित्तं शुद्धयेत् कथं वा किमु बहु तपसा विद्यया वीतभक्तेः. चित्तार्द्री भावमुच्चैर्वपुषि च पुलकं हर्षबाष्पं च हित्वा चित्तं शुद्धयेत् कथं वा किमु बहु तपसा विद्यया वीतभक्तेः.
चित्तार्द्रीभावमुच्चैर्वपुषि च पुलकं हर्षबाष्पं च हित्वा चित्तं शुद्धयेत् कथं वा किमु बहु तपसा विद्यया वीतभक्तेः. चित्तार्द्रीभावमुच्चैर्वपुषि च पुलकं हर्षबाष्पं च हित्वा चित्तं शुद्धयेत् कथं वा किमु बहु तपसा विद्यया वीतभक्तेः.
त्वत् गाथास्वाद सिद्धाञ्जन सतत Marimrijyamanoyamatma. That's one word. Marimrijyamanoyamatma, comma. So that whole line is together. Chakshur vat tattva sukshmam bhajati, comma. Nathu tathabhyastaya, one word, tathabhyastaya tarka kotya. Twadghata swada siddhanjana satatamari mrijyamano yamatma chakshurvat tattva sukshmam bhajati natu tatabhyastaya tarka kotya.
तद्गाथास्वादसिद्धाञ्जनसततमरीमृज्यमानो यमात्मा चक्षुर्वर्तत्वसूक्ष्मं भजति न तु तथाभ्यस्तया तर्ककोट्या त्वद्गाथास्वादसिद्धाञ्जनसततमरीमृज्यमानो यमात्मा चक्षुर्वर्तत्वसूक्ष्मं भजति न तु तथाभ्यस्तया तर्ककोट्या
त्वद्गातास्वादसिद्धाञ्जनसततमरीमृज्यमानो यत्मात्मा चक्षुर्वत्तत्वसूक्ष्मं भजति न तु तथाभ्यस्तता तर्ककोट्या
Last one.
त्वत्
Tathabhyastaya tarkakotya.
तथाभ्यस्तया तर्ककोट्या त्वद्गातास्वादसिद्धाञ्जनसततमरीमृज्यमानो यमात्मा चक्षुर्वत्तत्वसूक्ष्मं भजति न तु तथाभ्यस्तया तर्ककोट्या
Answer 7. Dhyanam te shīlayeyam samathanusukabadhasano nasikagranyastāksha purakādhīhi jita pavanapataśchitta padmam tvavancham urdhvagham bhavayitva rabi vidushikina samvichintyoparishtat tatrastam bhavayetvam sajala jaladara shyamalam komalangam. So 7, 8, 9 are together. So for those of you who are into meditation, who do a lot of meditation, this literally is Uddhava asking Krishna is, how do I attain you through meditation? So what should I meditate on? How should I meditate, right? What form should I meditate on? So here, Krishna over three, there's a lot of stanzas on it, but summarized in 3 stanzas here, right? So the first one, it says, like we saw in Ashtanga Yoga, right? It's very important, first of all, before you begin the process of meditation, that you don't wish anything bad to others, right? So that's number 1. So don't wish anything bad to others. Be clean yourselves first, internally and externally, be clean, right? And then then is the asana, like we said, you have to sit in a proper pose, right? This is meditation. You can't just lie down, and you can lie down and think, but that's not meditation, right? For meditation, you have to sit in an erect pose, right? Body has to be straight, right? And then he says the focus here, Krishna is saying, is you have to focus your, not some people like focus it on the middle of the eyes, etc. He says the focus has to be in the tip of your nose. That's why he says nasikagra. So the first line, last word. So nasi agra. So nasika agra, at the tip of your nose, right? You should actually focus. That's where the focus of your meditation should be. Of course, you should have breathing. The pranayama has to be in control, right? So the inhalation, holding, exhalation, you bring all of that under control. And then he says, you then imagine, so then you can meditate on Om or anything you want to meditate on, right? And then you do the breathing control. So once you get all of this, you have to imagine in your heart, right? You imagine a lotus which is actually open in your heart. And in that lotus, you imagine that the entire world is there. So all the stars, all the planets, everything is on that lotus. And then you imagine my form. That's what Krishna is saying. You imagine my form, which is actually standing on that lotus. And then you visualize that form of mine first. So it goes through a set of stages, right? First, you visualize.
Rajeshji, we can't hear you.
Lost you.
Okay, back. I don't know why. You pay all the Comcast Xfinity bills and still this happens. And nothing else is on at this time in the morning.
In the process of visualizing.
I know, I'm sorry. So it says so you have to imagine that lotus open, and with all of that, and Bhagavan standing in that lotus form. Step number 1, because it's very difficult to imagine nothingness, right? So he says you visualize me standing there, and what that form is, we'll see in the next one. Dhyanam te shilayeyam, sama tanu sukha bhaddhasano nasikagra, put a plus, Nyastakshaha put a F to join, Nyastaksha Purakadyehi. So that put a Visarga comma. So Purakadyehi is Puraka, Kumbhaka, Rechaka, which is Puraka is inhalation, Kumbhaka is holding it, Rechaka is bringing it down. It's a pranayama, right? So Purakadyehi, comma, Jita, Pavana, Patash, Chitta, Padmam, Tvavancham. Dhyanam te शीलहेयं समथनु सुखबद्धासनो नासिकाग्रन्यस्ताक्षः पूरकाधीः जितपवनपतश्चित्तपद्मं त्ववाञ्छम्.
ध्यानं ते शीलयेयं समतनुसुखबद्धासनो नासिकाग्रन्यस्ताक्षः पूरकाद्यैः जितपवनपथश्चित्तपद्मं त्ववाञ्छम्. ध्यानं ते शीलयेयं समतनुसुखबद्धासनो नासिकाग्रन्यस्ताक्षः पूरकाद्यैः जितपवनपथश्चित्तपद्मं त्ववाञ्छम्.
ध्यानं ते शीलयेयं समतनुसुखबद्धासनो नासिकाग्रन्यक्षान्तः पूरकाद्यैः जितपवनपतश्चित्तपद्मं त्ववाञ्छम्.
And the second line, first word, Nyastaksha.
Nyastaksha.
Yeah.
Nyastaksha. Okay. ध्यानं ते शीलयेयं समतनुसुखबद्धासनो नासिकाग्रन्यस्ताक्षः पूरकाद्यैः जितपवनपतश्चित्तपद्मं त्ववाञ्छम्.
Urdhvagram.
Rajji, sorry
Yeah.
to bother you.
Yeah.
Inhale, hold. அப்புறம் the kumbhakana என்ன?
Kumbhaka is to hold. So Puraka is to so Puraka Adyehi. So he's saying Puraka, etc., etc. He's just saying it. But Puraka is the inhalation of it. Kumbhaka is the holding of it, and Rechaka is the exhalation of it. But he's just saying Puraka Adyehi, etc., etc., which means it means the other two are naturally there. Urdhvagram bhavayitva, comma, Ravi Bidhu Shikinaha, put a is shikinas, Samvichintyoparishtat, that's one word, and then comma at the end. Tatrastham bhavayetvam. So there, situate, we'll situate you there on that, on the lotus which is in your heart. Bhavayetvam, comma, Sajala Jaladhara Shamalam Komalangam. The description is beginning, but we'll cover it in the next answer. Urdhvagram bhavayitva Ravi Bidhushikina Samvichintyoparishtat Tatrastam bhavayetvam Sajala Jaladhara Shamalam Komalangam.
ऊर्ध्वाग्रं भावयित्वा रविविधुशिखिनः संविचिन्त्योपरिष्टात् तत्रस्थं भावयेत्त्वां सजलजलधर श्यामलं कोमलाङ्गम्. ऊर्ध्वाग्रं भावयित्वा रविविधुशिखिनः संविचिन्त्योपरिष्टात् तत्रस्थं भावयेत्त्वां सजलजलधर श्यामलं कोमलाङ्गम्.
वाग्रं भावयित्वा रविविदुषिकिनः संविचिन्त्योपरिष्टात् तत्रस्थं भावयेत्त्वां सजलजलधर श्यामलं कोमलाङ्गम्. ऊर्ध्वाग्रं भावयित्वा रविविदुषिकिनः संविचिन्त्योपरिष्टात् तत्रस्थं भावयेत्त्वां सजलजलधर श्यामलं कोमलाङ्गम्.
Answer 8. Anilashlashnakesham Jwalita Makarasat Kundalam Mandahasasendardram Kaustuba Shri Parigata Vanamalo Ruharabhiramam Srivatsankam Subahum Mridulasadudaram Kanchana Chaya Chelam Charusnigdorumambo Ruhalalita Padam Bhavayeham Bhavantam. So the description of what we saw in Dasakam 2 versus what Kardama Muni meditated on in Dasakam 14 This is what Dhruva was instructed by Narada in Dashakam 17. This is what Krishna is telling Uddhava here. This is what Bhattacharya is going to again say in Dashakam 100. They're very, very consistent because the thing is, they don't want each of these greatest of devotees to be going and giving different things to meditate on. Then people are going to get confused. So which one? You said this, right? So the description is very consistent, right? From what Bhagavan is telling to what Brahma meditates on, to what Narada meditates on, to what every meditates on, it's the same thing, right? So here he's saying the same thing here, and you can mark this. It says that you're standing. So how are you standing? You have, of course, Jaladhara Shamalam, Sajala Jaladhara Shamalam Komalangam. So the color is of the dark gray clouds. It's not blue, it's not black, right? When you're driving and you see rain about to come and you look up on the sky, the color of the dark clouds, right? That is the color. That is the upright color to meditate. That's the right color. So in that form, then you just imagine, that there's a Srivatsam mark, which is there, the Mandahasam, the face is always smiling. This is the form, doesn't mean the definition of this. You imagine him wearing a Pitambaram, right? You imagine him having Chaturbhujam, in the Chaturbhujam having the Shankam, Chakram, Gadam, Padmam, all of that, having a Vanamali, wearing a garland of forest flowers, which are actually there, then appropriately decked up, the way you want to imagine it to be decked up, right? And then having the Kaustubhamani, the Srivatsa mark. So all of this you imagine, and you imagine the full form of Bhagavan who's standing on that open lotus, which is situated in your heart, but the focus of your meditation is in the tip of your nose, right? So with that, you control your breath, you control your asana, and in that form, you first start the meditation, right? And then he'll tell how to zoom out and go later, but that's how you start with. Anila Shlakshna Kesham, comma. And we'll cover in excruciating detail in Dashakam 100 about every part of the body. So you can use that as a meditation also. But here it's just summarized in one stanza. Anila Shlakshna Kesham, comma. Jwalita Makara Sat Kundalam Mandahasa, put a plus, Syandardram, and then a comma. So Mandahasa Syandardram, comma. Kaustubha Shri Parigata Vanamaloru Harabhiramam. Anhilashlakshna Jwalita Makarasat Kundalam Mandahasa Syandardram Kaustubha Shri Parigata Vanamaloru Harabhiramam.
आनीलश्लक्ष्णकेशं ज्वलितमकरसत्कुण्डलं मन्दहासस्यन्दार्द्रं कौस्तुभश्रीपरिगतवनमालोरुहाराभिरामम् आनीलश्लक्ष्णकेशं ज्वलितमकरसत्कुण्डलं मन्दहासस्यन्दार्द्रं कौस्तुभश्रीपरिगतवनमालोरुहाराभिरामम्
आनीलक्ष्लक्ष्णकेशं ज्वलितमकरसत्कुण्डलं मन्दहासस्यन्द्यार्धं कौस्तुभश्रीपरिगतवनमालोरुहाराभिरामम्.
Second line, first word, Syandardram.
Syandardram.
Yeah.
आनीलक्ष्लक्ष्णकेशं ज्वलितमकरसत्कुण्डलं मन्दहासस्यन्द्यार्धं कौस्तुभश्रीपरिगतवनमालोरुहाराभिरामम्.
You're saying Syandya. You are saying Syandardram.
Okay, Syandardha.
Yeah. Shrivat Sankam Subahum, comma. Mrudu Lasadudharam Kanchana Chayachelam, comma. Charu Snigdhorum, breaking at that ma, Snigdhorum Amboruha Lalita Padam, comma. Bhavayeham Bhavantam. Shrivatsankam Subahum Mrudulasadudaram Kanchana Chayachetam Charu Snigdhorum Amboruha Lalita Padam Bhavayeham Bhavantam.
श्रीवत्साङ्गं सुबाहुं मृदुलसदुदरं काञ्चनच्छायचेलं चारुस्निग्धोरुमम्भोरुहललितपदं भावयेऽहं भवन्तम् श्रीवत्साङ्गं सुबाहुं मृदुलसदुदरं काञ्चनच्छायचेलं चारुस्निग्धोरुमम्भोरुह ललितपदं भावयेऽहं भवन्तम्
श्रीवत्साङ्कं सुबाहुं मृदुलसदुदरं काञ्चनच्छायचेलं चारुस्निग्धोरुबम्बोरुह ललितपदं भावयेऽहं भवन्तम् श्रीवत्साङ्कं सुबाहुं मृदुलसदुदरं काञ्चनच्छायचेलं चारुस्निग्धोरुमम्बोरुहललितपदं भावयेऽहं भवन्तम्
सर्वाङ्गेष्वङ्गरङ्गत्कुतुकमिति मुहुर्धारयन्नीशचित्तं तत्राप्येकत्र युञ्जे वदनसरसिजे सुन्दरे मन्दहासे तत्रालीनं तु चेतः परमसुखचिदद्वैतरूपे वितन्वन् अन्यन्नो चिन्तयेयं मुहुरिति समुपारूढयोगो भवेयम्. So when we saw the Ashtanga Yoga in Dashakam 4, it said something called as a separated dhyana and dharana. Dharana and dhyana. So the dharana is where you are consciously meditating on something. Because initially when we sit, your mind is going to just wander like crazy, right? It's going to be all over the place. So you got to, the only way to bring your mind is to consciously start focusing on something. So in that, the first step is, it's easy to imagine a lotus with Bhagavan standing without any details, with high level details, right? You can imagine a Vanamali, you can imagine Pitambaram, all of that easy to imagine. First step. So he says, first you meditate on that form, get that form meditation completely in control. Once you reach that level of control, then he says you go from the bottom to the top, one part at a time. So focus, zoom in on the feet. Then zoom in on the thigh, zoom in on the pitamara, and then keep zooming in on each of the body part of Bhagavan and spend time meditating on each of the body part. And finally, you go meditate on the face of Bhagavan. So you kind of one step at a time in terms of progression, right? And finally, you are in a state where you're focusing, just zooming in on the face of Bhagavan. You go look very, very specifically, how is your eyes, how is your nose, how is your cheeks, all of that. Once you are also overcome that, then it says stop even focusing on that, and then only you can focusing on the nirguna form, which is a formless, right? Then you imagine nothing and then you meditate. So that's when you get to the state of dhyana, because the state of dhyana is you are not trying to focus on anything, you are just sitting still and meditating, and your mind is not wandering, nothing is coming in your mind. So that is that state, right? That's the final state. It's not easy. So he says, that's why he says you have to go about this in progression. If you just sit and just try to meditate on nothing, it is not going to happen. So instead of getting to the way you get to that state is gradually, first imagine the full form, then goes bottom to top, zoom in on each of it, then you rest on the face. Once you reach that over several times, then you can imagine on the nothingness. And then that way, you will then get into that state where you're not even meditating, you're just sitting in that dhyana stage. Sarvangeshwanga rangat kutukamiti, muhur dharayan nisha chittam, tatrapyekatra yunje, vadana sarasije sundare mandahase. So beautiful smiling face, the sundare mandahase. Sarvangeshwanga rangat kutukamiti muhurdharayannisha chittam tatrapyekatra yunje vadana sarasije sundare mandahase.
सर्वाङ्गे शङ्करङ्गत्कुतुकमिति मुहुर्धारयन्नीशचित्तम् तत्राप्येकत्र युञ्जे वदनसरसिजे सुन्दरे मन्दहासे सर्वाङ्गेष्वङ्गरङ्गत्कुतुकमिति मुहुर्धारयन्नीशचित्तम् तत्राप्येकत्र युञ्जे वदनसरसिजे सरसिजे सुन्दरे मन्दहासे
सर्वाङ्गेष्वङ्गरङ्गकुतुकमिति मुहुर्धारयन्नीश चित्तम् तत्राप्येकत्र युञ्जे वदनसरसिजे सुन्दरे मन्दहासे सर्वाङ्गेष्वङ्गरङ्गकुतुकमिति मुहुर्धारयन्नीश चित्तम् तत्राप्येकत्र युञ्जे वदनसरसिजे सुन्दरे मन्दहासे
Tatraadinam tu chetah, comma.
ஒரே ஒரு டவுட் ராஜேஸ்ரீ.
Sure. Yeah.
ரங்கத் குதுக்க மத்தின்னு இருக்கு. குதுக்க மிதியா?
Yeah, kutukam iti. It's kutukam iti. So kutukam iti.
Okay, thank you.
Tatraadinam tu chetah, comma. Parama sukha chid advaita. It is chit advaita. So imagining a form which is a non-dual form. So parama sukha chid advaita rupe bitanvan, put in at the end of it, comma. Next in, if you have a double na, that becomes a. Anyanno chintayeyam, comma. Muhuriti samuparudha yogo bhaveyam. With that, I will attain union yoga. Tatralhinam tu chetah paramasukachedadvaita rupe vitanvanne anyanno chintayeyam muhuriti samuparudha yogo bhaveyam.
तत्रालीनं तु चेतः परमसुखचिदद्वैतरूपे वितन्वन् अन्यन्नो चिन्तयेयं मुहुरिति समुपारूढयोगो भवेयम् तत्रालीनं तु चेतः परमसुखचिदद्वैतरूपे वितन्वन् अन्यन्नो चिन्तयेयं मुहुरिति समुपारूढयोगो भवेयम्
तत्रालीनं तु चेतः
Sukachit advaita rupe.
परमसुखचित् अद्वैतरूपे वितन्वन् अन्यन्नो चिन्तयेयं मुहुरिति समुपारूढयोगो भवेयम् तत्रालीनं तु चेतः परमसुखचित् अद्वैतरूपे वितन्वन् अन्यन्नो चिन्तयेयं मुहुरिति समुपारूढयोगो भवेयम्
Ittam twadhyana yoge sati punaranimādhyashta samsiddhayastaha durashrutyadayopi kyahamahamakya sampateyurmurare tvat samprapto vilambhavahamakilamiddam nadriye kamayeham tvamevanandapurnam pavanapurapate pahi mam sarvatapat. Like we saw in Dasakam 4, when you conquer this Ashtanga yoga, which will take several years, then you have an option. We saw it in detail in Dashakam 4, which said you can bring your soul up when you are ready to depart. And you can decide, do I want to exit it between my two eyes, or do I want to exit from the top of my head in the Brahmarandra? Because each of that is going to give you an option. So if you want, it will give you by conquering this Ashtanga yoga, you get the Ashta Siddhi first. Ashta Siddhi is ability to become an Ahima, Lahima, which is you can become small, you can become big, you can become light, you can become heavy, you can control people, you can do all of these things. You will get this Ashta Siddhis. But then you can decide whether you want to have the Ashta Siddhi and you want to go to the higher worlds, or you want to permanently not come back and get liberated. Right? That's a choice you will always have at that time, like we spoke about. But here, Bhatripad is saying, like we said, the true devotee doesn't even want liberation. The true devotee will always say, I only want to be devoted to you all the time. Whatever happens, let it happen, right? I don't even want that, because liberation means I don't know what's going to happen. I'll just merge, but I always want to be thinking about you. So he says, when you reach the state of dhyana, he says the Ashta Siddhis will be like, Hyaham, Aham, Ahamakiya. They'll be like fighting, please take me, please get this Siddhi from me, right? But the true devotee is like, no, I don't want any of these things. right? All I want is just devotion to you. So that is a true devotee. He says, please bless me. So I get that level of devotion. So even when the Ashta Siddhis come to me, I am not tempted by it. And I reject all of those Ashta Siddhi and Kamayeham Twamevananda Purnam. The only desire I'm going to have is always to be with you and be happy with you. That is a desire that I have. I'm going to reject all of these Ashta Siddhis. With that, Ugrapa, please eradicate all the ailments. So here we spoke about how you can attain liberation through, like we said, you can go through this Ashtanga Yoga, which is that Margam, or you can go through the philosophical understanding of how the Mahat, all of this, how to control your mind, not get deterred, all of that. That is the second one. And the third one is through pure bhakti, right? Through the Bhakti Margam. Ittam twadhyana yoge sati, comma, punar animadhyashta. So it's talking about the anima, mahima, lagima, the Ashtasiddhi. So punar animadhyashta samsiddha yastaha, comma, dura shrutyadayopi. So the next word, hyaham, starts with the half ha, breaking at that ma. Hyaham ahamikaya, comma. So dura shrutyadayopi hyaham ahamikaya, comma, sampateyur murare. Ittam twadhyana yogi sati पुनरनिमाध्यष्ट संसिद्धयस्ताः दूरश्रुत्यादयोऽपि ह्यहम् अहमिकया सम्पदेयुर्मुरारे.
इत्थं तद्ध्यान योगे सति पुनरनिमाद्यष्टसंसिद्धयस्ताः दूरश्रुत्यादयोऽपि ह्यहमहमिकया सम्पदेयुर्मुरारे. इत्थं त्वद्ध्यानयोगे सति पुनरनिमाद्यष्टसंसिद्धयस्ताः दूरश्रुत्यादयोऽपि ह्यहमहमिकया सम्पदेयुर्मुरारे.
इत्थं त्वध्यानयोगे सति पुनरनिमाध्यष्टसंसिद्धयस्ताः दूरश्रुत्यादयोऽपि ह्यहमहमिकया सम्पदेयुर्मुरारे. इत्थं त्वध्यानयोगे सति पुनरनिमाध्यष्टसंसिद्धयस्ताः दूरश्रुत्यादयोऽपि ह्यहमहमिकया सम्पदेयुर्मुरारे.
त्वत्सम्प्राप्तौ विलम्बावहं, breaking at that ma, विलम्बावहं अखिलमिदं nadriye, put a comma. So he says, I'm going to reject it because that's going to delay my union with you. So nadriye, comma, kamayeham, put a plus, kamayeham twamevananda purnam, comma. So I'm going to reject all of that because that's going to vilambam, it's going to cause delay, because all I want is, my desire is to be with you. So nadriye, comma, kamayeham twamevananda purnam, comma, pavanapurapate pahimam sarvatapat. Just say one time. Twatsampraptau vilambhavahamakilamidam nadriye kamayeham twamevananda purnam pavanapurapate pahimam sarvatapat.
तत्सम्प्राप्तो विलम्बावहमखिलमिदं नाद्रिये कामयेऽहं त्वामेवानन्दपूर्णं पवनपुरपदे पाहि मां सर्वतापात्. श्रीकृष्णाय परब्रह्मणे नमः.
त्वत्सम्प्राप्तौ विलम्बावहमखिलमिदं नाद्रिये कामयेऽहं त्वामेवानन्दपूर्णं पवनपुरपते पाहि मां सर्वतापात्.
कृष्णाय परब्रह्मणे नमः. सान्द्रानन्दावबोधात्मकमनुपमितं कालदेशावधिभ्यां निर्मुक्तं नित्यमुक्तं निगमशतसहस्रेण निर्भास्यमानम् अस्पष्टं दृष्टमात्रे पुनरुरुपुरुषार्थात्मकं ब्रह्मतत्त्वं तत्तावद्भाति साक्षात् गुरुपवनपुरे हन्त भाग्यं जनानां कायेन वाचा मनसेन्द्रियैर्वा बुद्ध्यात्मना वा प्रकृते स्वभावात् करोमि यत् सकलं परस्मै नारायणायेति समर्पयामि.
Thank
Thank you all.
you. Happy Women's
Thank you.
Day,
Happy
everyone.
Women's Day,
Happy
everyone.
Women's Day.
Enjoy the India final match.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Very
Thank
good.